Right. Thank you for that. So we will be starting in just a moment here. We will have Mike on stage there. Cindy, at this point in time, do you at least want to give an introduction of yourself? I'm going to stop my camera here. And then you can also kind of explain why that you're not on the video screen and how we had to improvise with technology. We were doing STEM thinking here.
Absolutely, Kelly, and thank you so much for the invitation to participate. You know, as I looked at the list of other speakers, I deeply regretted that we could not gather in person and hope that next year we're able to join together in person. What I appreciate so much about the STEM education community is a supportive and innovative environment, and I really, truly miss you. So my name's Cindy Hasselbring, and I think I probably know several on the Summit, and I currently serve as the Assistant Director and Senior Policy Advisor for STEM Education at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I've been there just under a year at this point. Previously, I have been a teacher for 16 years in Michigan as a high school math teacher and was engaged in various communities as part of that. Part of my career, so was a part of a NASA teacher group for a few years, was a presidential awardee for excellence in math and science teaching, also served as an Einstein Fellow at the National Science Foundation. So really looking forward to this presentation, and maybe Mike, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then we can get started.
Sounds great. Can you guys hear me okay?
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry. Hey, well, thank you guys for inviting us today. Kelly, thank you as always. As Cindy said, the highlight of my summer have been the last two STEM Leadership Alliances. We've had some great conversations with people from a wide range of backgrounds. I found the panel just before us, the one Soraya led, had some really interesting points that I found helpful. So as Cindy mentioned, I'm Mike Kincaid. I'm the Associate Administrator for STEM Engagement at NASA headquarters. Been in this role about 3 years. Been with the agency for coming up on 33 years. Feels hard to imagine. And spent the last 3 years in this role, managing the agency's efforts in helping kids get involved with STEM using the excitement of space. And so today's session, I think, is a great opportunity for us to talk about federal government as a whole, which of course Cindy and I kind of help facilitate and lead, but also to use some of the examples that we have in the NASA environment to flesh out some of those examples, if you will. I think we're still working on a set of slides for us to be able to share from, so I think we could just talk in general. Cindy, and you want to start off by talking about the role of SC STEM?
Sure. So yeah, and I apologize I can't be on video. We aren't able to do that at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, so I just have to call in. But we are fortunate to put our heads together this morning, as Kelly mentioned, and figure this out. So I'm grateful to participate. So as you may know, there are many federal agencies that have science and technology as part of their mission, and underneath that group is a community called COSTEM, which is Committee on STEM Education. It is a committee, and different agency heads are part of that. Mike and I co-chair a subcommittee underneath that big umbrella, so along with Karen Marangel from NSF. And those include the STEM education points of contact at 18 different federal agencies. So we'll have a slide later that shows you which agencies are engaged in that group. And it's a really great group that works together. And when we face a challenge like coronavirus, and we get together and meet and figure out how to help our stakeholders and the needs that they have. And that's been definitely an outcome that we'd like to share with you today about what are the resources that are available as a result of the coronavirus, what have federal agencies been able to do as a result. So we'll get more into the details of that. But I did just want to share kind of what STEM is. So it stands for Federal Coordination on STEM Education. And in December 2018, a White House or a federal STEM education strategic plan was created and released, and that really gave a better focus to what we can do in STEM education. And 3 goals were identified in that. Mike, maybe I'm jumping ahead here, actually.
No, go ahead. No, you're fine.
Ready for that? Okay. So we have 3 goals. One is to build strong foundations for STEM literacy. The second is to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM, which obviously this goal right now is a topic that we're all very concerned about, especially in light of students having to learn remotely. And then the third one is to prepare the STEM workforce for the future. As you know, the federal government has a lot of needs in STEM, but so does industry across the country. So those are our 3 goals, and we have subgroups that are focused on those, as well as the pathways identified in the strategic plan. And so we're really excited to share some updates with you today, and then also what the agencies have done in response to the coronavirus and what they can provide. So Mike, maybe I'll turn it back to you at this point.
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. I'll just add to a couple things Cindy said. It really has been a great opportunity. I spent most of my life at a field center here in Houston, Texas, actually. And when I got up to Washington, D.C., and they asked me to join this FC STEM that Cindy and I, along with a colleague from the National Science Foundation, the 3 of us co-chair, I have to admit, my first thing is, does the federal government, what will the federal government do here? But I've really been pleased to see how we can all work together. As you know, the federal government spends a fair amount of money when it comes to STEM, although NASA is a small portion. We've got a pie chart we can share with you later. But I think when we come together, we can make a difference. And I'm going to probably share this. There's an African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think so often we have all, at least at NASA, we try to go fast on our own. And I think when we can partner with other fellow agencies, or in the STEM Leadership Alliance, where we can partner with partners across the country, I think we can go a lot further. And so I think FC STEM and co-STEM, which is basically our bosses, when we come together as federal agencies, I think we can make a difference. And as Kelly first pointed out, and as Cindy also talked about, we're in a time of an unprecedented time. When you think about what's going on with COVID-19, I know we wouldn't be, as I heard the last panel, we wouldn't be here today on the virtual, right? If we had talked about this a year ago, let's make this virtual, we would have all looked at each other funny. But here we are, and we're making it work, we're figuring out how technology can help us. And then particularly, I think another theme that's going to come throughout these next couple of days is how do we make sure that everyone has access. I heard the last panel talking about that. That's clearly been something that Cindy and I have been concerned by when it comes to FC STEM. How's the federal government reach kids that may not otherwise have been reached? So you'll see Susan is joining us. We see Susan at the moment. Well, in just a second, she's the person with the slides. So we're working through the technology so you can see some of the pictures. And of course, to make this even a little bit more challenging, Cindy's not online, so you only see me, and Susan will show you slides in a second, but we'll get there. I think it's a great opportunity, though, for us to work through. Susan, will you go to slide 4 for us? Actually, I'm sorry. Let's go back to slide 2 for just a second. So this just puts a picture into what we were just talking about, right? There's a co-STEM and FC STEM. You can see my name and Cindy Hasselbring on the right-hand side. You can see all the different agencies that are little pictures there. Those are all the different agencies that are part of this. We go to the next slide. Okay, the slides might have gone away. Maybe there we go. So actually, we briefly talked about what are the goals. Let's go to the next slide as well. So this gives you a sense of just how much money the federal government spends. And it's a couple $1 billion when you add it all up. You can see NASA is one of those orange slices there towards kind of the middle center of the page. We spend about $140 million on STEM engagement. And so what Cindy and I thought we would do is just kind of tag team today and talk a little bit about, how does FC STEM work globally across all these agencies? And then also spend a little bit of time just talking about, well, how does it work in one agency as an example? We're kind of a microcosm, if you will, of the overall. Susan, let's go to the next slide. So this is an eye chart. So for those of you following along at home, I know that you can't read I don't expect that you can read all of that text. You might have amazing eyesight. There's 3 that are highlighted, though. And those three are written in bigger text on the right-hand side. So foster STEM ecosystems that unite communities, increase work-based learning and training, and then encourage transdisciplinary learning. So why am I showing you this? Well, I just wanted you to see that each agency had a chance to kind of go in and decide where their particular strengths fit in, where can they make a contribution, because we're not the same. And each of us have a chance to go look at it. So you'll see down that column, the kind of orangish column, NASA picked 3 bullets that we think we can particularly make a difference in. But my colleagues from all the agencies had that similar choice to be able to go and make those opportunities. So for us, in fact, this meeting that we're having today is really this foster STEM ecosystems that unite communities. That's one of the reasons why I'm glad to be part of the STEM Leadership Alliance, is that if we can come take our content and share it with you, I think we all benefit from it. We benefit, you benefit, and later in the presentation, we'll show you some slides of how you can get to some of that content. Let's go to the next slide. So we have a dog who's joining us today, which is always great because we all work together on this, and it really just kind of shows you. This slide is like the key drivers that we're dealing with, right? The first one is COVID-19. I don't know about you, but it's been different working from home. And when I think about it, I have a 7th grade daughter, and when she went to online schooling, that shifted for us. And so I think all of us are dealing with COVID-19 and what are the impacts on students and their families, and on in particular on our educational system. And then you look at on the far side, the social justice movement. Clearly our nation is grappling with some things that have been in the background for a long time, but have come to the forefront recently. And when you combine COVID-19 and access, it really shows the implications on our underserved, underrepresented population in STEM, and COVID-19 certainly isn't helping. So I think these are 2 things that we've spent some time certainly inside NASA, and I know we've talked about these things within SC STEM. Cindy, anything else you want to say about this particular chart?
Yeah, so we're on slide 7, right? Or are we on 6 still?
Yeah, we're on the turning point charts, intersection of key drivers.
Okay.
Slide 6.
Got it. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay. So yeah, one thing I wanted to share is, as Mike mentioned, many agencies are involved in this effort of STEM education across the federal government. But I think it's safe to say that many of them, if not all of them, really shifted gears quickly to try to address the needs of their stakeholders. So one thing that the White House Office of Science and Technology policy did was to work with an organization to create a site that included many resources called techforlearners.org. That's TECHFOR and then learners.org, which was a searchable online database of education technology tools for teaching and learning, recognizing that parents' role in remote education really increased significantly while they're doing their day job at home, while they're, doing all the other duties around the house. And so this website was put together, and I know there's a lot of resources out there and so on. I recognize that, but this was one thing that OSCP did in response. The Smithsonian Institution as well was able to offer quite a few distance learning resources with games. They had virtual museum tours, zoo webcams.
Hey, Cindy.
Yeah?
Hey, Cindy, I was going to tell you, we've gone ahead they can see the next slide with the federal response. I just wanted you to know what's up on the screen. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'm sorry. Totally sorry. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll stop there on that then. But it was
No,
pretty,
I just wanted you to know they could.
Yeah.
I just want you to know that they can see the slide. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll stop there, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, I think what we have here on the slide here is a number of our federal agencies that have come up. So you can see information from NOAA, their resource collection. The NSF has provided some content, as well as the Geological Service and Department of Ed and Smithsonian. So these are just a snapshot that Cindy was talking about, the organization that came to help us put this together. Susan, if you go to the next slide. This will show you a little bit. So for NASA's perspective, again, all of the agencies stepped up and kind of provided content, but I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about NASA's in particular. We created NASA STEM at Home grouped by audience or age range. So K4, 5, 8, 9 to 12, and there's a university session as well. For us, we also went to a virtual internship. So this summer, in a normal summer, we'd have around 1,800 interns across our federal communities. We thought we'd have 500 virtual interns, and I'm shocked to tell you we have 1,600. It just goes to show you the kind of like Soraya was saying in the previous one. When we get these challenges, sometimes from a technical perspective, we're able to come together and solve them in ways that we really hadn't expected to. So when we went to our IT and information security people back in March and April and said, how many interns do you think we could bring on? We thought we'd be doing really well, about 600. And so when we got to now up to 1,600, it just shows you that willingness to make this work. I'd also tell you that we've also looked at other things we can do with changing our online activities and how do we involve museums and science centers. Let's go to the next slide, Susan. And the next slide after that. So I'll just take a second. Let me I kind of like to give you some context for NASA and how do we fit into this federal environment. For us, we looked at, for our STEM engagement in particular, we looked to see how do you immerse students in NASA's work? How do we enhance STEM literacy, and how do we really spark an interest from students to explore? And these 3 strategic goals down at the bottom really kind of get to the heart of the work that we do at NASA. The first one is, what are unique opportunities where NASA or students can contribute to NASA's work? And obviously that's easiest at the college level, right, where we actually have students who are helping us design or think about future leading edge kinds of technology issues. It can happen, though, in the high school level. We have a program called Hunch, where high school students, usually vocational tech students, are able to build hardware that we use on the ground or occasionally actually fly on board the space station. That middle one is building a diverse future workforce with authentic learning experiences. Cindy mentioned, and we've talked throughout, we really care about wanting to make sure we reach all kinds of students and being part of this. So this diversity aspect is something really important to us. And then this last one, attracting students, helping them use hopefully the excitement of NASA. And behind me, you see my ARTEMIS screen. That's our new program to send the first woman and the next man to the moon later this decade. And so we want to be able to use NASA to kind of help inspire. Maybe there's some 5th grade daughter of someone out there that would really be interested by that might get them to think about STEM. Whether they end up at working for NASA or whether they just have an aptitude or whether they at least consider opportunities in STEM, all those in my mind are a win. We're trying to use this as a way to kind of to break in. Let's go to the next slide. So I'll just spend some time here, and I'm going to turn over to Cindy in just a second. But I'll start by saying NASA, when I got up in this job 3 years ago, our content was everywhere, and it was really hard to find it. And so we've been working really hard to come up with a stem.nasa.gov website, which is curated by some of our educators. It's divided up by audience and age range and discipline expertise. So if you have not been to it, I hope you'll go to it. It's not perfect. It probably never will be, but at least we have much of our content together. And when we did our NASA STEM at Home for COVID-19 response, it allowed us to go get some of our best content and kind of curate it and bring it to the forefront. So I hope if you're joining us today, I hope that you use this website. And Cindy, I don't know if you want to use this as a chance to talk about what we're working on in FC STEM.
Yeah, so soon we will be releasing a progress report on STEM education. We have to submit one annually. We tried to move the timeline up. And in that, and I know that we will have COVID-related content, also some updates on what our interagency working groups are doing, and some other things I honestly can't share, Mike, because they're deliberative, so I kind of been told that. But anyway, so be looking for the progress report, because I think it'll give you a better update once that's released and made public of some things that we're working on that we'd love to share with you. So I think, Mike, I will have to leave it at that right now. Okay. I'll turn it back to you.
Makes complete sense. Thank you. No. So, Susan, will you go to the next slide? So let me just pause for a second. You might see behind me an ARTEMIS. And so one of the things that we decided to do is bring together different experts to talk about how do we reach students when it comes to K-12. And so we brought together a diverse group of people both from engineers from inside our agency, as well as existing partners that worked with us, as well as kind of some leading edge people that came and spoke to us. Reps from NSTA, AIAA, other places like that came on and visited with us a little bit. We would love to help you see some of that content. So if you go to nasa.gov/join ARTEMIS, you'll find content that's available to you for a variety of different sources. Let's go to the next slide. I think I want to pause here. If I was in person, if we were in Florida, I would have asked you how many of you sign up for NASA Express. It goes to about 48,000 educators every Thursday. And usually when I'm talking to a crowd like this, I get about half the audience that sign up for it. It's because these are usually the people we're talking to are particularly interested in NASA and kind of know about this. A little bit of feedback there. So I just thought I'd mention to you that it is a link that you go to nasa.gov/STEM Express. If you do a Google search on it, every Thursday we send out the most recent content. And so when I think about how do people access our content, how they partner with us, or how do we help you and how do you help us, the nice thing about the website is you can go in anytime you want and find stuff we have. And the NASA Express is something that we push out every Thursday that provides content of things that are just on the horizon or things you might want to get involved with. For example, we later this month, we will launch the next rover to Mars. We just named it, or it was called Mars 2020 rover, and it got its name back in March, called Mars Perseverance. And later we'll show you a link to some videos. I highly recommend the video. The voiceover is from Octavia Spencer, the actress who is one of the actresses in Hidden Figures. She just did a great job and talks about, space travel and both the human side and the robotic side takes perseverance. And I think that really fits along with what we're dealing with in today's country. In our country today, when you look at both COVID-19 as well as looking at the challenges we're dealing with social justice. Next slide, Susan. So what you'll see here, these are a few just K-12 activities. Every agency has some that they're working on, but shameless plug time. We'll show you a couple of them that you could join us with. So that first one is STEM Next Generation. There's a number of different activities that we have that you can join us and participate in. That Moon to Mars, again, I talked a little bit about some of the work that we're doing with returning, sending the first woman and the next man back to the moon. Commercial Crew, we launched our first set of American astronauts. First time in 9 years that we've actually launched American astronauts from U.S. soil back in May, and so we have 2 astronauts who are on board space station as we speak. They got there on a SpaceX vehicle, and then we'll expect to have a Boeing vehicle sometime in the near future. So again, those are ways that we're making a difference that students can connect with. The Museum Alliance is actually a work with a bunch of informal. So if some of the people on today are involved with informal institutions, after school programs, or libraries, or other kinds of Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, those kinds of activities, something called the Museum Alliance or the Informal Alliance is a way for you to get content that we can provide to you in a special area. So you just do a Google search on Museum Alliance. We'd love to find you. And last but definitely not least is EPDC, Educator Professional Development Collaborative. We provide a lot of online training and opportunities, digital webinars on NASA content that's aligned to national standards. So if you have a minute to go check out EPDC, I highly recommend it. Next section. So also thought I'd tell you where else you can learn about NASA this week. Kelly really has given a couple of different people a chance to come speak. First, Steve Swanson, one of our former astronauts, he's up later today. Steve is passionate about this kind of work. He has, particularly because he's at a university, works particularly with our university students, but he has some interesting things to say. And if you're on if you're on today's telecon, you probably know who Barbara Morgan is, our first NASA educator astronaut who launched on STS-119, and she's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in her area, and she'll have a chance to take questions. She would like it to be as interactive as possible, so I hope you'll join and be prepared to ask her questions. Lance Bush will be joining from the Challenger Center. They're obviously a nonprofit. They're not NASA, but we work with them closely. Lance and his team does a great job of reaching particularly middle school students and using NASA content. And then one of my colleagues from the Johnson Space Center is going to be talking about integrated STEM, using some NASA technology. So you can hear from Jessica on Wednesday. So again, these are a number of different ways that you can get involved and learn more about NASA and how we can plug in. Let me pause here. Cindy, any other things you would like to add at this point?
No, I think what you said is great, Mike. I would welcome a time for questions if anybody has any.
Yes, so this is Kelly. There was one question that came up about, are there any efforts, because there's always a lot of talk about science being the hub, and I love that you mentioned actually Hidden Figures there, but one of the questions that came up, is there more efforts to have the agencies interested in making mathematics as a magnet?
So that's a great question, Kelly. I do know, and I don't have a great answer off the top of my head, I do know that a number of agencies were indeed working on that, NSF, NOAA being two of them. And it's something as a former math teacher that I'm very passionate about. And so something we still need to spend a lot more time with, to be honest and transparent. So, I welcome more conversations. If anybody wants to directly reach out to me, I'd be happy to talk to them more in detail. But it's definitely something we need to work towards as one of our objectives within a pathway of the strategic plan.
Great. Mike, anything to add there?
I was just looking at this comment. I was reading this. Barbara Morgan. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad I said something nice about Barbara. She's listening at home. So she just typed in the NCTM and the NASA collaboration produced mission mathematics are still relevant. See, this is where it's great having people like Barbara who are backing you up and answering questions like this. So you'll get a chance to hear from her tomorrow as well. And Barbara, thanks for talking about that collaboration does still exist. And I would just say that we continue with David and others, so we're interested in. It's as we all experiment with your tool, Kelly. Cindy, you can't see this because you're telephone only, but there's a discussion chat. There's a chat page, and I'm reading through it, and this is where I'm going to go back to that line I said earlier. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is where you have people like Barbara Morgan chiming in and helping you answer questions that you're getting from the crowd. So it's a good example of how we can continue to collaborate as a team.
Great. Thank you, Barbara, for chiming in there. Appreciate it.
So one of the other questions.
Hey, I think we're to a place that if you guys. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the other questions, I've had the amazing experience to partner with NASA at a variety of levels, from when we used to do in-person workshops at your various centers to, just participating in classes and things that are online. And I think one of the things is, you talked about the internships, you talked about some of those. What kind of advice can we give out there to educators on how do they get their students really engaged in that? So you have some students that are there, and then this is a two-part. We also have a global audience as well, and NASA is highly respected there. So would also just love any thoughts and tools, feedback that you would have for them as well.
If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of answer from a broad level, and then maybe have you speak about NASA's perspective on that.
Please.
Would that be okay?
That'd be
great. So, Kelly, that's a great question. And one thing, I like to look for silver linings and what's been happening around us for the last 4 or 5 months. And one thing that has greatly impressed me is the agencies coming together and figuring out how to offer internships. Because as you know, things got somewhat complicated with not allowing people onto agency sites and so on. And how do you give them technology and background checks and all of that? And I think that part of what I have really appreciated is seeing these agencies work through challenges like that, but then come up with solutions that may be able to stay in place. So if there's not a federal agency near a student, maybe there's a chance they can do a virtual internship down the road where they don't have to be living close to an agency in a more urban setting or something, so there's some really good outcomes that have come from the coronavirus pandemic as a result. And I know NASA has been so involved and engaged in helping other agencies recognize that there are ways to pursue these virtual internships, and then also sharing what practices they use. So, Mike, you probably have some of those and what you all are doing, but I just know I think there's some things that are actually going to stick to make internships and work-based learning opportunities more accessible for more students, in the future. And I'm really excited about that because I do think it'll help lead to a more diverse and equitable participation. So, Mike, do you have some thoughts about those?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. Thanks, Cindy. And it's funny because Al Byers, and shout out to Al as well, who asked a similar question, in the chat session about how do I see online internships changing, and it kind of goes back to the core of your first question, Kelly. Is what would my message be to educators who find themselves in COVID-19? I think the message I'm going to say they've heard 100 times, so there's nothing brand new here. But we have to stay flexible. We have to be prepared to deal with the unknown. And frankly, at NASA, we think about lots of different alternatives. That's kind of how our astronauts train, right? They don't know exactly what's going to happen. We train for all kinds of different alternatives, things that we maybe would never have happen, but we think about those things as best we can. And when I think about the work that our educators, and frankly, can never thank them too many times for the work that they're doing on the front lines of making a difference for literally millions of kids. But I think today's session is a good example of how there is opportunities and there is some silver linings in the midst of this dark cloud. Who would have thought this would be virtual? Who would have thought that Cindy and I could be joining and talking to people from literally, as Kelly, as you mentioned, from around the world about what's going on at NASA and how could this all fit together, what's going on within STEM and around the country. The second part of your question, so I think we have to stay flexible. The second part is what about online learning and what about online internships? I bet we will have some people this summer who we would never have found before and who never would have been able to participate with us because they may not have been willing or able to travel to a NASA center. And Al asked this question, what do I think next summer will look like? And if I could tell you for sure, I would be able to make billions of dollars, I think, and I can't. But I do think that once this genie's out of the bottle, it's never going to go completely back. I think we're going to find that our work, I think, as most people are watching today, I think you would have probably agree with the statement. We can never go back to where we were because we've now tried things out and realized, we can do things virtually that we didn't think we could do. It's not perfect. It's not a replacement for face-to-face. But there's opportunities, and we're able to open some doors up for people that maybe we couldn't have in other situations. If you had told me, even in the 1st of March, that we'd have 1,600 virtual interns, I would have said you're crazy. I would have just said the systems wouldn't allow it. That would be too much change. I didn't think we'd find 1,600 mentors across the agency. We're only an agency of 17,000 people. That may sound like a lot to you. To me, that's tiny compared to some other agencies. So the fact that 17,000 people have somehow figured out a way to bring on 1,600 virtual internships, it just blows my mind. And so what else is out there? What else is possible? What else could we do in this new opportunity that we can't even imagine? I tell you that as we look at ARTEMIS, and this is the second part of that question, Kelly, you asked about international. We're only going to go to the moon if we can do this internationally. And so we're creating something called the ARTEMIS Accords, where we're signing up with other international partners to join with us. The current International Space Station will celebrate its 20th anniversary this year, and it has 16 different nations that are part of it. We couldn't accomplish it without all of us coming together. And ARTEMIS, as we return to the moon, won't simply be just an American activity. It's going to be an international one. And I think we have yet to figure out what does that look like for students. We have conversations about that, but it's a long ways from being done. And I do know that ARTEMIS generation and working these kinds of work will only get there through partnerships with Challenger Centers and AIAA and NCTM and to NSTA and the other organizations that are out there that are engaged in this kind of work. So I'm excited. I think it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds in ways that we couldn't have perceived or even imagined 6 months ago.
Great. Well, thank you both for that. And I want to just double check. I think I love reading those comments there and stuff. And it's so great that we have this nice, supportive group that's following and that's there. Is there any lasting thoughts that you have for the audience just to kind of continue this? The reason this conference was so important for me and I'm going to say for Sal and Roy and Rosa to still do this, even though it was an enormous challenge, is the fact that learning still needs to happen. That collective model still needs to happen. So while we can't be together, here we are. And, it's been a tough road. It's been a little bit discouraging at times. I think we've all felt that at the human level. So, Cindy, I love when you said, you always look at that silver lining there. I want to have you just both leave us just with some encouraging thoughts there.
Okay. Thank you. I think I really have to say I am so grateful for the educators out there that are working incredibly hard to meet the needs of students, whether that be having office hours, having 15-minute one-on-one conversations. There's some really good work going on out there, and I know some of them are tired and frustrated. And I just want to share, you never know which of your students is going to, be an astronaut down the road or be a congresswoman or man or senator or whatever, and really be able to influence and impact STEM education. And I just hope that they realize that their effort will help that and help this country in STEM future. And so I want them to know that we realize their hard work. We're trying to be helpful. I would love to hear from them if they have some thoughts about ways that we can be helpful. I'm always open to that conversation. So I just want to say, now is a time that you have a window to try something different virtually, and possibly even in person. But I just want to say you're doing a great job. You're working really hard, and thank you so much for your efforts. We do really appreciate that.
Yeah, I just would jump on and echo the comments, Cindy. I would say this conference has always given me something new to think about, or maybe even something I already knew, but having someone express it differently got me to thinking about it differently. And I would say when I listened into the earlier panel and Soraya and that team, I hadn't thought about it this way. They said, you know what? This pandemic is actually helping us to solve the problems we're solving. We're solving them through technology and science. COVID-19 is all about the science. And so I think about, when we look back in 2040 and my 11-year-old is 31, I wonder if she'll look back and she'll see science maybe a little bit more important because, hey, it's solving problems with pandemic, right? It's actually figuring out how to get a vaccine. That's not new, but it certainly is no longer geeky, right? It's front and center to everyone's interests around the world, literally. And then when I think about this technology, if you told us last year, hey, we're going to use this backstage thing and we're going to log in and we're going to show our charts and we're going to all be virtual, I would have been like, oh my gosh, that's too complicated. But here we are, we're figuring it out. And so technology, again, is leading the way. And so my thanks to you, Kelly, and to Sal, and to the rest of the folks that pull this off, because it does get us to pause and think about how else could this be. I hope that there'll be someone listening today that goes, something Cindy and Mike said, that made me think differently about the subject, because I know that I will continue to learn from this process. So I just want to say thank you for being there. All of us have to keep a positive attitude in a very unsettling time. And in particular, when it comes to dealing with the social inequity we have, how do we step into that as educators and as leaders to make a difference for everybody who lives in America? And I think if we can do those things, those will have an international component as well, an international benefit as well. So with that, I really appreciate the time. It's always good to do presentations with Cindy, and thank you to the folks at STEM Leadership Alliance to make this possible today.
Great. Well, thank you both, and I really appreciate it. And feel free to jump in anytime and listen to any of the other sessions there.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Okay.